Hi everyone, welcome. Uh, I see 11 of you are here, and also I have the chat on my phone. And the noise was on. Sorry about that. Hello world. Yeah. Hi everyone. So volume a bit low. Yeah, I can fix that. I can fix that before starting. Thank you. Hello Sensei. Why thank you. Yeah. Actually, yeah, I can fix that. I can fix that easily because I turned it down before starting because I thought it would be too high. Okay, there we go. I hope that's a bit better. Yeah. So today's lecture is a bit of a esoteric topic. Doing nothing. That's not very self-explanatory, so I will explain. Uh, the general premise is actually pretty simple. So imagine that you play a game, and that every game, at every given moment, you don't make the position worse for you. Like you preserve the state of the position and don't make things worse. Like you don't break anything. Then your opponent won't do that because your opponent is human. So then you will win. It's a kind of simple. Now it doesn't quite work like that for several reasons. But I think that's when I try to formalize it and give it like a definition. That would be the definition. Yeah. Let me know if the sounds okay because I turned it up a little bit, but yeah, I hope it's good. And I want to start with an anecdote that sort of inspired me, or like, sound is perfect. Thanks. Still really low. Oh, uh, that's conflicting. When I learned to do nothing on the chessboard, it was mind blowing. Yeah, actually, doing nothing is even more important in chess than in Go, because in chess, like in Go, I call it doing nothing, but it's not actually doing nothing. Not quite in the same way. It's whereas in chess, you can actually do nothing. Like you can try and not play, if you possibly can. Just not change the position as much as possible. That's like the thing. Happy Saturday. Hello. Yeah. So I'm willing to change the noise, like the sound, if more people chip in. But for now, I will assume that it's manageable. Like you could just turn your volume up. So my anecdote. I was in. I was at the Congress, the European Go Congress, last year, and I was at the train station talking to a six-ton player, to a very strong six-ton player, like stronger six-ton player, and he wanted to show me a fuseki where he thought that he had like completely tricked his opponent into like a very bad position. And he showed me the beginning of the game. And actually, this isn't exactly the game. This is what I remember. I definitely remember the idea, like what was interesting about the position, but it's probably not exactly the same game. So he's white, and he showed me this position where he was very proud that he jumped, his opponent jumped, then he jumped, his opponent jumped, and he played e9. And he thought that this was like extremely good for him. He thought that black is in huge trouble. Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, yeah. I apologize for that. I've forgotten like the last three lectures, and somebody needs to tell me. Okay, so fortunately, I hadn't shown very much. Yeah. I think now you should see something. So anyway, my friend is white, and he was very proud that after he jumps, making his opponent jump, and after he jumps, making his opponent jump, he gets to cap. And he was very happy because he thinks that this stone doesn't like exist. Yeah, you're locked in here with me positions. Yes, yes, yes. Um, and I, my first instinct when I saw this position was like, nothing's happened. That's what I said. Like nothing's happened. What do you mean? And he was very happy about enclosing the stone, and I thought that that isn't very important. Like, this stone is enclosed, but it's not useless. in various ways, and I thought just the game goes on. I found it shocking that on move 18 he's like so convinced he has a great position, and he was very sure, and I was very sure. So we bet. We bet. I think we bet for like €5 what the AI evaluation would be on this position, and I thought that there was no way that AI would give Black more than a 2-point advantage. But he wanted to bet on 4 points. So I was like, okay, it's free money, and it was actually Black is slightly better in this position according to AI. So that's how I won €5. Um, point being, when I like at the time, I actually said nothing happened on this board. Like, there's no way that a particular side is much better, and I think from my perspective, the important thing is that nobody has made any moves that I would consider weird. Like, in the marginal moment, like, none of these moves seem unreasonable to me. Like, and also, actually, that Sixth should be aware of that, because I mean, Black knows that this can happen. Black's not stupid. Like, Black understands that if I play here, and White plays here, and I play here, and White plays here, then this is the position that will happen. So E5 E5 feels weird. I mean, E5 is normal. I guess that you're used to the shoulder hit because it's the modern move, but the less modern move is also totally fine. Like, you can jump. That's not a problem. Yeah, and I think that this is a trait that a lot of stronger players have. Not all of them. Some players are very active, but I think a lot of stronger players have this trait that not many, like, I'm going to say players, maybe even above 6 dan. I think a lot of 4 dans also do this a lot. Wait. My mouse fell off the table. There we go. Can somebody ban the bot? I can do it. It's fine. But actually, I can't. Yeah, yeah. I hope somebody bans that because I can't actually ban from here right now. Anyway, and I think that stronger players are really good at doing nothing and what I call preserving the state of the board. And I wanted to show some examples of stronger players doing this, not just me. And some of you may guess which NGD's teacher, which Nordic Dojo teacher's games I'm going to show as an example. But I also wanted to give a little bit of an example to make more concrete what I mean by doing nothing. Because in Go, you don't really do nothing. Like passing is not an option, right? You don't just pass. That's impossible. Or it's possible, but it's not good. So you're always changing the position in some way. So I don't, like, in a literal sense, mean you do nothing. But I guess, yeah, I guess I'll just go into the example and then I'll explain what I mean more concretely. So this is a game by a student of mine, and my student is White. This game is very recent. My student's about 1 dan, and my student's opponent is about 3 dan. And I want to get to... Yeah, it feels a bit like Control Go. Yes, it is very similar to Control Go, and I will get into the relationship between them. Yes. I would say that probably Control Go is half of doing nothing, let's say. So yeah, this is the key position. So my student is White, and this is a position where these stones are kind of under attack, and you need to decide what to do with these stones. And my student chose a very active plan, and I think I had a very chicken plan. Let me remember exactly what it was. Did I want to kick? I'm not sure. Maybe I wanted to kick. I forget my exact I forget my exact plan. But actually this move isn't that important. So first white cuts. And that's not terrible in itself. And then white came out. The idea being that black can't cut because there's some liberty issues. And then black protects, threatening to cut, and then white attaches, fixing the cut. And okay, now white sort of fixed his shape. Like this is quite strong. You can make eye shape if you want, like at any given moment. And now white has to decide what to do. This white seems like a very good player. Yes, indeed. And now white made a huge mistake. And when white played this cut, and I understand this psychologically from white, but when white played A, white wasn't going to play A to not run out the stone. But running out the stone here is not the best idea. And I want to frame white's next move, which is m5. First of all, as a mistake, and second of all, as a mistake that changes the nature of the position. You need to overplay now and cut at f6. Normalize making mistakes and Go, kindly signed by all the DDKs. I will try to be gentle. Yes. I make mistakes too once in a while. Yeah. So going out here is very natural in the sense that you've already played n5. Black has this huge area of influence that you really want to do something about because you don't want it to just grow. So you're like, let's make a group here. Hi, Prince Lena. Yeah, so white runs out, and I think this is a mistake. And as an alternative, I want to instead play g7 and then black connects f6, and I play g8. Yeah, and I'm going to get to the point about f6 zogi. f6 is bad for the same reason m5 is. So these two moves are bad for exactly the same reason. Or at least I don't like them for exactly the same reason. Let's look a little bit into the future and see what happens if you play either one of these moves. You cut, then I assume you want to extend down at f5. Then black is going to play d5. This is immediately a problem because you have a cutting point at A. So you either have to allow yourself to give up these stones and have like a pretty bad shape around here. And okay, let's say that you defend instead. Then black's going to Keima, or okay, maybe Keima, maybe not. Something like this looks pretty severe. So white can fight this. So okay, black has to be a little bit more careful than this. I would probably Kosumi. And then after white jumps, I would probably either jump and make it a liberty race, which is not clear. So if we really want to make it simple with black and not take any risks, I'm going to jump. And then white's going to jump, and then black's going to jump. And I dislike this result for exactly the same reason. And it's not terrible, right? This isn't game ending. Like, you will keep running with your weak group and you will try to live somehow, and you probably will. I don't like this for the same reason I don't like m5. If we look forward into the game, what happens is that now white just has a weak group, like another weak group. And what both of these constitute, both m5 and f6, what they are doing is that they are creating another weak group. They're changing the nature of the position. And when you change the nature of the position by adding another weak group or creating another huge sphere of influence, you are that's risky. Sometimes you turn the game into something worse for you. And the alternative that I'm suggesting doesn't really change the position in the same way, because the general characteristics of the position are actually all still true. So black still has influence on the lower side, black still has potential, white still has this group that is like almost alive but not quite yet, so it's still a weak group, and like it's not locally alive quite. It has one eye in Sente on the right side, but it's not strong yet. Nothing has changed on a, like, if you describe the game to someone at this point, your description wouldn't be that different from your description at this particular point. But the position has improved for you within the context of that description. So it's still true that black has influence on the lower side. Black just has much less influence on the lower side. It's still true that your group is weaker, but your group isn't like as weak because now you're a little bit stronger in the center. So by extension, you're a little bit less weak. Conversely, when you describe this position to someone, your description is totally different because now you created another weak group. So now instead of saying, oh, I have a weak group, black has some influence, like maybe I have some influence on the left side, the story that you're telling is I have two weak groups. And in fact, this weak group is even weaker. This weak group is even weaker because white is weaker. So we can imagine something like this, then white starts suffering. So white will, how will white suffer here? Maybe something like this. And then if black's really mean, black can play this move, which takes all of white's eye space, making O3 Sente. But maybe it's even meaner to play an N2, because then white has to live on the lower side. And you're going to try to live, and black's going to try to kill you. And something will happen. You will either die or you won't. If you die, you lose. If you don't die, then, like, the game goes on. But the way that the game might go on is black turns to attacking your other group that's now weaker. And maybe this includes something very severe. Maybe if black's feeling extremely mean, black can take the eye shape first and then play here. And this is no fun for white. So what white did essentially was choose his way into a position that is just no fun, where white is just suffering because white has two weak groups. And this is like totally voluntary. And again, I understand this decision from a psychological perspective, because you don't cut at n5 to not run out the stone. You cut at n5 because you want to run out the stone later. So in some sense, white has already implicitly taken this decision a long time ago. But I think the framing that you can take to decide not to do this is that if you were to describe this position to someone, the description looks much worse after you play m5, as opposed to something more gentle, like g7. You could also consider, by the way, extending a g8, which might be better shape. I'm not totally sure about that one. And then after black plays h5, you can reduce if you really want to later. Like you have some ideas of playing k5 and reducing. But I guess in the short term as white, I would probably play another do nothing move. So something... Actually, would I do nothing or would I play s8? S8 isn't doing nothing. But I sort of like s8 as a move. But you have many options. You could play here. You could... Yeah, you could play s8. I guess those are the main ones I'm interested in. And this black influence on the lower side isn't as strong as it could be if it were attacking white, actually. It's some potential for points, but it's not like attacking anything, which is a good thing. And that will lead me to what I would call the like formal is a very strong word for this, the quote-unquote formal definition of doing nothing, which is preserving the state of the board. However you described the state of the board before your move, you can describe it roughly the same way. And this doesn't mean your position didn't improve, because your position can improve in like subtle ways. Like in the last example, white got a little bit stronger, black's influence got a little bit less prominent, and like all of these things. But these are subtle improvements. And I want to talk about the two main ways of doing nothing, and this is where we're going to connect things back to control go. So for those of you who don't know, control go is a concept sort of invented by Anti, which is a crossover from card games. So some of you might know control decks, which I absolutely hate playing against. And the idea of control go is surprisingly to control the direction in which the game is going and to like not allow your opponent to do certain things they want to do. And this ties into one of the two things you do when you do nothing. So these are the ways to do nothing. You actually do nothing, which means playing the type of move we've talked about that doesn't change the nature of the position. The other way to do nothing is to prevent something from happening. So sometimes your opponent wants to do stuff. And when your opponent wants to do stuff, that will change the nature of the position as well. So you're kind of implicitly doing nothing by doing something that prevents the position from changing. And we're going to show some examples of that a little bit later in the lecture. Now, I want to talk about, before we go into the examples, I also want to talk about some of the issues with doing nothing as a philosophy. So, the main problem that you have when you play do nothing go, which a lot of stronger players do, is that when your opponent makes mistakes, you don't punish them exactly. Like there's some mistakes that your opponent makes that you need to punish very actively. Like you need to attack a group. Maybe your opponent even left a group that needs to be killed by Tanuking and you need to kill it. And changing the state of the position is a good thing if that makes your position better. So the general philosophy that if I do nothing, the position won't get worse for me and my opponent will make mistakes. This is only true if your opponent's mistakes punish themselves. Like, say you play a move that takes points, and your opponent plays a move that takes points, and your move is slightly better at taking points than your opponent. That's fine. But now let's say that you play a move that takes points, your opponent invades your territory, and takes all of your points, and you do nothing about it. Then that's not very helpful. So, and actually a lot of players who do nothing, I think, struggle against, like, unreasonably aggressive play. That's like changing the nature of the position very often. The other problem that you have when you do nothing is that doing nothing essentially is playing some good move. It's maybe not even the best move, but just some good move that preserves the nature of the position. The good enough move, the threshold for what is good enough depends on your judgment. So something I used to do a lot with my teachers was after some game, we would look at these waiting moves. Like another way of calling these is just waiting moves, where you do nothing and you wait for your opponent to do something. Is you think about whether they're too slack. Like, is it is my position, how much worse is my position getting, or how much am I missing out on by not playing the active move? And like one heuristic that I have for whether my moves are too slack is going to an AI, and if the AI move drops like less than 1 point, then it's fine, more or less. I mean, there are exceptions to this, but it's a good heuristic. And yeah, likewise, let's say a move dropped more than like 3 points, and it was probably a little bit too slack. Like that's the type of range we're going in. And in order to do nothing, you have to have a threshold of loss that you're willing to accept, or a threshold of imperfection that you're willing to accept. And for that, you need to be able to judge the board well. Like, you need to have a good idea of what your position in the board is, and you have to have a good model of what the board is like in order to understand whether you're not changing it, basically. And I guess finally, I will say that doing nothing the whole game isn't a good idea. The main reason I think that this is a valuable concept to communicate to you guys is that players tend to be a little bit active in general. Like, there's a general impatience to do stuff, and just waiting isn't very fun for most players. And players also tend to get a little bit, I'm going to say, emotional about certain things that happen in the game. So one example which I showed at the beginning of the lecture is this example of this Sixtan acquaintance of mine getting getting very happy that he enclosed this stone at A, and me thinking that this is like not really important. I think people in general tend to overestimate how extreme a position is, and how much actually changed in a position. And I think that this notion of being able to do nothing, that playing a move that just does things very subtly, very slowly, in a kind of chill way, is something you can do. Like it's not a game losing idea. Is that why AI always doing crazy stuff? AI is not human. AI, I mean, if I had to characterize AI, it does play pretty aggressively, but you're not an AI, Zogi. And yeah, I think that this is the main value. This is the main value in doing nothing. It's a perspective you can take. It's a perspective you can take on the game, which reminds you that if you aren't sure what to do, if you aren't sure how to change the position, or if you aren't sure that invading this area is going to actually help your position, then playing a waiting move, just some move that you think is big but doesn't do something very obvious, is not a bad thing. It's not bad to wait. And sometimes this is very helpful in games. I would say that about half of the moves I play in the average game are waiting moves, are me just thinking, well, I don't really know what to do here, so let's just not do very much. Okay. I want to go into some examples. And the first example is a game from a Nordic Go Dojo teacher who's absolutely infamous for doing nothing. And what I want to do here is, I think I want to pull on chat and ask you guys, what did you think is the do nothing move here? Like, what kinds of moves fit this criteria of not changing the position in like a general characteristic sense, but like improving it enough that it's an acceptable move? Usually I don't call it doing nothing, or like giving initiative to my opponent. Hi Ben Zero. Both of us skipping the Grand Prix finale, I see. This, I mean, in this position, O17 is definitely a do nothing move. G16 is also a do nothing move. Those are all very good examples. I wanted to go into the example of the games I wanted to show. This was an earlier example, but those are all good suggestions. So this first game is played by a Nordic Go Dojo teacher who is the king of doing nothing. You all know him. He's Lucas Podpera. Yeah, he's sort of infamous for playing very calm Go. And this is a win of his from the Go Baron title. So the Czech so the Czech Republic has this tournament called the Go Baron, which is like a kind of qualification process and then a title match. And it's sponsored. It has like quite a bit of money in it. And this was played earlier this January. And he is black against Strong Sixtan, who challenged. Like Lucan's currently the title holder. And I want to go to like specific moments in the game. And what I like about this game is that black made no moves that aren't easily understood by someone significantly weaker than 7-dan. Like, I don't know how much weaker than 7-dan, but significantly weaker. Like, the play is very clear. So that's also why I thought it was a good example. So Lucan is black. And yeah, this is the first do nothing move. I've seen Lucan play this move a lot recently. This one I won't ask you to guess, it's just 018. To be honest, it's a move that I would have a hard time playing. I don't wait that much. Yeah, black keeps his corner and just plays a very passive move. I mean, it's obviously not doing absolutely nothing because it makes A weaker, it gives black some points, but it's definitely a slow move. Prince Lena, here we are here to learn to play moves like 018. So hold your booze for another day. Yeah, so we keep doing nothing. Actually, white's also kind of doing nothing. White's not very active this game. And I think the first moment where I'd like to ask about what you might want to do here is this position. And not just necessarily the next move, but like the next couple of moves. Because I see a couple of different options for black, as in how you might want to play this. So white has a group here that's like weak is like kind of strong. Jump towards the center is never bad. Yes, this is one of the central tenets of doing nothing go. In fact, Anti's control go. So Anti's lecture on control go. I think the title was Control Go: How to Win with 1 space jumps and 2 space extensions. So let's make both our candidates A and B, because those are 1 space jumps and 2 space extensions. 2 space jump into F12. Yeah, F12 is doing a bit too much. So what F12 does is I think it might even allow a really like crass cut from white, like just something very brutish, but it works just to cut. So I don't want to leave this kind of, even if white does nothing, even if white just jumps, I don't want my stone at F12. I want it at E12. And even though F12 looks like it's doing more, that's exactly what we don't want to do. We want to do nothing. We want to play something that's fine, not something that's extra in this mindset. Yeah, so 1 space jump is the natural move. It's also what Lucan would do, and it's what Lucan did do. I think the type of move I would perhaps be tempted to play here is D10. The general idea being that after white somehow protects, then I get to play a running fight where these stones stay weak. I would be very tempted to do that, especially because I think black's own group is like somewhat safe, because I can make a base with C14, or like part of a base. Attach to strengthen the bot left seems feels bad to me. Yeah, I understand. I don't feel that bad about it because white's already quite strong. Yeah, I understand. But maybe you will change your mind, Princeling, after seeing Lucan's next move. So after black jumps and white jumps, I was watching this game. I was watching this game live, and kibitzing in chat, and I actually have it in the SGF. Lucan thought for like 3 or 4 minutes, and I was shocked. Like I was really surprised, and I said so in chat, that what I called the Lucan move still hasn't been played. 1 space jump to G12 is never wrong. Yeah, one space jump to G12 would be totally fine. Of course. I think that the 1 space jump that I would prefer is actually E10, which is what Lucan played. And I think that here, my assumption from what Prince Alina has said so far is that the appeal of G12 is that black wants to play here later, or do something on the left side. So something like D8. So black wants to do something later on the left side. Lucan does not want to do something. Doing something is against the Lucan way. And black would much rather make this influence a little bit less influential rather than just invade it. Because if later in the game you do something that involves like this pincer, then you're changing the nature of the position by creating a lot of weak groups. And when you play E10, you're not changing the nature of the position, you're just making white's influence less interesting. And I think in the game, in the game, white exchanged this and then jumped. And now Lucan played. Oh, first Lucan peeped, and then Lucan played g12, which is the move we suggested earlier. And the only thing that surprised me about that sequence of moves was that Lucan took 4 minutes to jump here, because for me it's like the type of move he'd play without thinking. I might ask him sometime, like, what were you thinking about instead of this move? I'd play it too without thinking, to be quite honest. Okay, so the next thing I'd like to mention is I think we can discuss to a certain extent which classification of doing nothing we are practicing at any given moment. So I think that a move like 018 is mostly I'm actually doing nothing, because you're not preventing white from playing 018. Conversely, I think the second the last few moves that we've looked at are a little bit more in the I'm also thinking about what my opponent wants to do and trying to prevent that type of category. So yeah, I think that here, another reason that black is so concerned with playing e10 is that if black doesn't play e10, then white might play something like e10 themselves, or might play f9, and this is like creating influence for white. So this jump of black's is important in the sense that you are reducing the amount of cool things that white can do by making white's influence less important. E10 is strengthening the stones, urgent before big. Yeah, E10 is also like so E10 is definitely strengthening the stones, but you have many ways to do that. I think the other reason that we're even interested in playing E10 is limiting the white influence. Undercutting at 018 is not good for white. I mean, it's not bad. Yeah, so playing 018 for white earlier in the position we talked about is not bad. It's just a bit slow, kind of like black's move. Like, if you were doing nothing as white, you could play 018, but that's the point. It's a do nothing move. It's a move that barely fits the requirements of being good enough to play without losing, like without getting at a disadvantage. So let's say black isn't really worried about white playing it per se. Okay, so far, I think that one of the nice things about this game, like I mentioned, is that nothing that Lucan is doing is like hard to understand. I would say that maybe white's invasion over here is a little bit hard to understand, and white's Kosumi, as Ben Zero mentioned, is a little bit hard to understand, even if you're the level of the player who played it. It's a little bit of a strange move shape-wise. But black's moves are all very natural. Like, you could play these moves, and by you I mean anyone who's watching this stream. Like, all of these jumps are just moves you can play. And white plays g18, and I found this an interesting moment. This isn't so related to the lecture, but it's a somewhat interesting moment in the sense that white has some cutting points around A. And I think that if you wanted to keep them active, you could consider protecting at f17, because you make your shape stronger and you prepare to cut. Or you prepare to, like, you can cut in various different ways. Like, this one, even though it's a bit crude, you can cut this way, which is actually also well, I mean, white will trade it for the white will trade the stones for the lower side. But basically, the stronger you are in the area, the more you preserve these ideas, and maybe somebody would be tempted to protect. Instead, Lucan did not protect and played the other do nothing move that we had discussed a little bit earlier in this review. For me, there's like one obvious do nothing move. It's also a tedomari, which is a word I learned from Antti. Tedomari being like the last big move on the board, or like the last move of its size on the board. And the move in question is just R8. R8, oh, E8. E8, yeah, So, yeah, I think several people guessed R8. Zogi corrects himself to R8 before anyone CC said E8 earlier. E8's fine, I guess. E8's nothing wrong with E8. I think the reason E8 isn't that interesting is that Black's group is already kind of strong because we already added a move to it. And White's influence is also already kind of limited because we already played this exchange. So White's jump to E8 isn't that interesting. But E8's fine. E8's fine. There's nothing wrong with E8. And R8 is indeed the move of choice. You considered both moves, I see. Yeah. So what one might not like about E8 is that after White starts taking the stone. Oh, White started with this attachment, which is very fancy. I forgot about that, but okay. Black has to live in Gote, and moreover, now that White is even stronger, then you could argue that the cut around A is a little bit like less of a thing. E8 doesn't make points. So yeah, E8 doesn't make points, but I think making points isn't too important to the topic of the lecture, let's say. So this idea isn't very tempting for many people because White's going to get points, and White's going to get White's going to get points and strength and incente because Black's going to have to defend at the end of it. And I think some people would find this hard to bear and wouldn't play R8, would instead just defend. And to be honest, I think I'm probably one of those people. I'd have a hard time. I'd have a hard time giving this up, especially because I mean I have a very concrete reason, I suppose. So I'm thinking about things like, imagine that I later try to cut like this, and actually, in the short term, the cut is pretty okay. The cutter right now is a big deal, yes, because I was thinking about what if I cut here, and then I thought actually White's fine. Like White can run out this way, and I can't cut because of the snapback. And then I realized Black can wedge in barbaric fashion and get quite a lot of stuff. Like this is basically a broken shape for White, and you're definitely dying with the stones. I guess you could consider sacrificing them, but I agree. I wouldn't want to do that. So I guess Lucan thought that okay, White still has a problem. Like maybe he didn't read it in detail, but he thought White still has a problem, and therefore I can just do nothing in this area and I won't lose anything. Let's say like this idea of White isn't getting White much. Indeed, White defended in the game, and White defended in a very funny way, which I dislike. I think White bumped and jumped here, which I think is not very good shape. But this is aside the point of the lecture. I guess it's okay. You're defending your shape somehow. And here's another moment where you could think about ways to do nothing. You can also think about just the move that you'd most want to play. I guess that there's several options. As it happens, I think most of the reasonable moves in this position do nothing because that's kind of something that happens in Lucan's games. Like before you realize it, all of the moves are doing nothing. It's a skill of his. I guess that there's one particular way that you could do something. Yeah, there's one way you could do something, but I guess I'd be curious to hear what people's preferred moves are here. I guess I have three or four options in mind. Defense time, b4 m3 j5. Yeah. Okay. M3, B3. Yeah, okay, so F7, F7. F7 is looking at G5, which I somewhat dislike as an idea. I mean, it's okay, but it weakens something. E8. I see. Actually, nobody's exactly pointing at the moves that that Lucan played, or at the area that Lucan played. So Lucan played here, which I will explain in a second. Um, I think there's some very good ideas here. One of them that has been suggested is either B3 or B4. And these are just making territory and not really changing the nature of the position. But they're also preparing this cut, which makes white's shape a little bit weaker. So it's nothing super drastic, right? It doesn't start a new fight or something like that. But it's definitely a good enough move to play. I think that that's very decent. What are some other moves that were suggested? M3. Yeah, M3 is also one of these moves where you're just doing a little bit. You're weakening these white stones a little bit. You're making a little bit of territory. Also very reasonable. Most of the moves are very reasonable. I'm gonna make a case for why Lucan's move is the most doing nothing move on the board, because with many of the moves that have been suggested, including F7, did somebody suggest cutting G5 yet? No, not quite. I think so. With most of the moves that I've seen suggested so far, most of them have an ulterior motive. So when you play B3, you're preparing to cut G5. So you have ideas of your own. When you play M3, you're actually preparing to do this kind of invasion later. And by later, I mean maybe very soon. So you might be considering this type of invasion, which is very hard to deal with for white. If any of you don't know, when you have pinstring stones at A and B, and black is generally strong all around, this type of invasion is super hard to deal with for white, because, just as an example, let's say that you try and kill black locally. This cut becomes very annoying because suddenly, like, A and B are both dying. So this type of M3 move isn't as innocent as it looks. So both B3 and M3 have like ulterior motives. You're preparing something. And conversely, this P12 move is doing nothing in the sense that it doesn't have a follow-up. It's just a standalone move that's not changing the position, because probably that right side was probably going to be black's anyway. You're just kind of increasing the degree of certainty and increasing the expected amount of points. You're not really weakening any groups. You're not doing something drastic. But it's probably not a bad move. I think I'm not sure I would play this move. I think I might be tempted to play M3 for the reasons I mentioned. But then again, I'm not the doing nothing type of player. I'm trying to explain a phenomenon that other players practice much more than I do. It's removing good options for white. The shoulder hit wouldn't hurt a bit. Yeah, for sure, for sure. So I'm very sure that one of the ideas that Lucan had when he played P12 was most definitely that he's annoyed by white's shoulder hit. So not like that. So a very important skill when you do nothing and you are playing moves that from your perspective don't change the position. It's easy to miss when your opponent can do something that will change the position in a very like strong way. So sometimes you want to see that and prevent it, and that's also part of doing nothing, because what you want as a mindset, and I also don't mean that you should have this mindset throughout the entirety of the game, but it's a perspective you can take at different points in the game. It's something you can consider. You can think about, well, if my opponent does something next, will that change the nature of the position? And what black might have been thinking is that, well, white here could consider this kind of invasion or this kind of shoulder hit, and that would maybe change the nature of the position. So let's make that bad. Let's make that impossible. And now, if we think about the candidate moves for white, there's stuff that really don't do much to the position. There's stuff like e8 or like m3 or those. That's most of it. Like white's running out of interesting things to do on this board. What if doing nothing ends up in dull endgame game? Well, that does happen. So if you do nothing the whole game, that is what will happen. You will just end up in a dull endgame. Then if you're Lucan, you win. Yes. We are describing how Lucan plays. Yes. Again, the reason I find this valuable to communicate to you is that I don't believe that doing nothing the whole game is the right thing to do. I have already discussed what the problems are with doing nothing the whole game. Like, if your opponent overplays and you don't punish it, if you're preserving the state of the game, but the state of the game keeps improving for your opponent because your opponent keeps overplaying, for example, that's a bad idea. And you can also do nothing in, like, if you fall behind for any reason, doing nothing is also not a good idea, because the basic premise is the game is even, I don't make the game worse for me, I will win eventually. That doesn't work if you're already losing. So there's many reasons that you wouldn't want to do nothing, but I'm offering it as a perspective that you can take at different points in the game. And the main motivation for this is that I think that players are too eager to do stuff. Like, in the example that we looked at earlier, my 6th son friend being very, very excited about capping this stone. I think that this, if you're overly attached to the idea of capping this stone, it's not even dead, by the way. Like, white can most definitely live, black can most definitely live there if they want to. And I think, like, I mean, black doesn't do this now. I'm very sure black doesn't do this now. But let's say black wanted to live, for the sake of argument. Black could most definitely do something like this and be alive. That's so it's not a dead stone. It's definitely not a useless stone. And you can think about this as just some position. You can think of this as just some position where everyone played normal moves, and then we think about, well, would you rather have this move for this move, or this move for this move? And the answer is, I don't know. I'm not actually sure. And both of them seem okay to me. And even if they're not okay, the difference has to be very small. Capping feels satisfying somehow. Yeah, I don't disagree that capping is satisfying, but this is not the same as it being good for you. You can like it while understanding that it's not good for you. And I think that this perspective that you can take of, oh, nothing actually happened this game. Like, nobody played any moves that were unreasonable. Like, would you say that, at least I wouldn't say that G3 is an unreasonable move. So if we take this perspective that actually nobody played moves that are very weird or that are clearly bad so far, so nothing has happened, so probably the game is even. And I think that this type of perspective can be very sobering, because we humans are very emotional about things. We like capturing stones. We get scared that our influence isn't going to be useful, so we start a bad fight so that our influence is useful. Like, we do all kinds of things that involve changing the position. And I think that when you change the position, it's generally speaking a good idea to at least be aware that that's what you're doing. Like, I think it's important to understand the distinction between a move that generally preserves the state of the game and a move that changes the state of the game or allows your opponent to change the state of the game. And the reason that's important is that if you don't change the state of the game, the position's probably not going to get much worse for you or much better. It's like a waiting move. You're just doing nothing. If you change the state of the game, that can have all kinds of implications. So in our example of Lucan's game, if you at this moment, and by this moment I mean this moment, if at this moment you allow you allow white to even invade here somehow, uh, or you, even if white themselves does nothing, but if you are preparing, let's play a do nothing move for white. Let's say that you prepare to start this fight and invade here somehow. There's many different ways you can invade. I'll just show one for example. Here you're already not doing nothing, and this generally is much higher risk for both you and your opponent. Stuff is going to happen, and I think that it's important to be really aware of that, because when stuff happens is when you should use time. Like a move like R8, I wouldn't take any time on. This is actually how I do time management. When I am doing nothing, I play my moves very quickly. When I perceive that there is a decision to be made that is actually changing the like creating more weak groups, invading something, allowing my opponent to attack me, right? Those kinds of decisions are definitely more momentous. They're actually making the game look very different. And I think those kinds of decisions should be made with much more deliberation. M3 is not playing from your bigger Moyo. Yeah, M3 itself is a do nothing move. I'm just saying that it allows, it is preparing a follow-up. So M3 is preparing a follow-up that will change the nature of the position. So later, if you decide to play Q2, you should be aware that, like, if you play M3 with the idea of later invading, you should understand that that changes the position. I remember that a while ago, I realized that if I moved forward here, so I was not feeling I have an advantage in the position, I would feel behind and would feel uneasy about the game. I think I've had a lot of students that feel uncomfortable when there's nothing happening on the board, especially if they have influence. Like, if they have influence, they want to use their influence to do something. And also in positions where there's nothing to do, I think a lot of them tend to do stuff. Like, they tend to start a fight, or they just fill up the board with stones that are ostensibly doing something. And I sort of want to caution against that. Like, at any given point, just waiting is fine. Like, if you don't want to do anything in particular, don't force yourself to. Like, just a waiting moves are fine. And by definition, they're not really making your position much worse. Usually, it's very hard to play a do nothing move that totally makes your game bad. Now, I think that depending on the level you are at, you can be more or less comfortable with waiting moves that lose more or less. So sometimes you play a waiting move that is making your position worse because it's a bit slack. Like, it's not the best move. It's a little bit slower than other moves you could be playing. And like I said, my own tolerance for how much a waiting move of mine can lose is like less than 1 point in AI. That's my heuristic. If it loses more than that, it's a bit slack. If not, it's fine. And you can have your own tolerance for like what is an acceptable waiting move, but that's for you to figure out. And I do think that waiting moves as a concept are very valuable. Like, even if you're not playing waiting moves the whole game, you can take this perspective that at any given moment, unless your group is dying or something, you can just do play a move that doesn't do much. Technically, under the definition I gave of doing nothing and the ways I described that you can either do nothing or prevent your opponent from doing something, living a group is also doing nothing, in the sense that it doesn't change the position. So yeah, in general, moves that don't change the nature of the position it's very hard for them to be very bad, and that's why they're a good tool to have in your toolbox. Okay, I want to finish off by using a couple of examples from my own games. And here, this is a game. Is this the game? 018 might lose more. Yeah, 018 might lose more than 1 point. In the previous example, this is worth noting. 018. 018 in this position. So in this position that we were discussing, if white plays n18, I think that's... Oh, o18. I doubt o18 loses more than a point. We can check it, but if someone can check this and get back to us, I'd appreciate that. But I don't think o18 loses more than a point. It loses at most a point, I would guess. N18, which is a move I described as a do-nothing move, might lose more than a point here. I'm not sure. Okay, this I actually didn't finish this game talking about this game, mostly because Lucan's opponent did something. Like, Lucan's opponent invaded, and then Lucan killed him. That was good for Lucan, and the game's over. Another 5-0 bet, indeed. And I just like this game so much because Lucan, like, did nothing and played moves that are very understandable to players of all levels and just won by playing very simply. Which is when Lucan's at his best. So I thought it was a cool game to show. Also, his opponent didn't do that well invading here. This isn't a good invasion. But yeah, I thought the rest of the game wasn't that important, and I want to move on to an example from my game. This is a one-move example. I don't think I want to look at the whole game. I am black, and my opponent is a, at the time, 6 dan, now 7 dan, who was previously in the chat. And yeah, this game was played about 1.5 years ago, or well, 1 year and like 3 months ago. And I'm black, and yeah, I want to discuss this move a little bit. I wanted to ask people what they wanted to play, but I accidentally showed the move, so whatever. This game, like this particular moment in this game, was a little bit interesting because I have this group that's kind of weak, and even though you've seen what I've played, I'm going to disclose that J7 is not the best move for a computer. The best move for a computer is like J17 or something like that. Oh, okay, move 7. O18 loses about 1.2. Okay, so Prince Lena had a point. It loses a bit more than a point. Yeah, you win. I just didn't bet 5 euros. So I want to discuss this position because my jump was not the best move. And I am wondering what people's instincts here are. If I were playing on the lower side, I probably turn rather than jump. Ah, I see. Okay. Yeah, turn rather than jump makes a little bit of sense. And actually, I don't really understand why I didn't turn. If I were playing the game now, if I were playing the game now, I would turn. I think turn or jump feel good. And the reason I remember this position is that I was pretty sure that this jump, or like at least a move in this area, like protecting this group as a concept, is the best thing to do, which the AI did not agree with. I do agree with this turn in retrospect, and I don't really understand why I didn't play it. I think... Oh yeah, I think I understand now. I remember now. Okay, I think my problem was that white will Tenuki, and white can Tenuki this very comfortably because white can capture this stone at any time. So a move like this isn't really pressuring white at all. Like, I'm actually the one with the cutting point. So I remember thinking it doesn't really pressure white in any way. And then if I want to serve my purpose, like my idea of actually helping my group and getting my group out, then the jump is a bit better. I'm pretty sure that was my thought process. I'm not sure if I agree with it anymore. Because K5 does put a bit of pressure on white's area and does reduce white's territory. Jump feels too close, maybe bigger jump. So something like H8, maybe? I don't know if that's what you had in mind. I think H8's very reasonable. I thought this position was curious because at the time, I had no doubt that the best move is to defend the group somehow. Like, maybe the way to defend the group isn't clear, but defending the group is what I would like to do. And afterwards, the computer told me that h17 and j17 are the preferred moves. Now, to be clear, this is definitely in the threshold of a good do nothing move, because I think it lost something like 0.3 points. It's a totally okay move. But I think that the reason that this is a good do nothing move from my perspective is that we can imagine what's going to happen if I don't play there. So let's say that I Tenuki, then I was reasonably sure that my opponent is going to play something like J7. Now, my opponent playing J7 isn't necessarily because J7 is the best move. This also has something to do with me knowing my opponent. Maybe even something like H7 and jump here, something like this. And in this case, I would have a weak group that I need to take care of. And I was looking at this type of variation, and I thought, I don't want to deal with this. Like, this is... I am giving white an opportunity to change the game from a sort of boring game where nobody's doing anything and everyone is just waiting. Like, the game proceeded with white... Like, okay, here I stopped waiting because M17 is asking for a lot. Let's imagine that white played J17. I would probably play B17 or some other, like, waiting move, like maybe even here. And we split the board into pieces and we all take our points and we're all happy. So J7 sort of keeps the board boring for a little bit longer, whereas when I play H17 or something like that, I allow white to change the nature of the position and make it interesting again. And that's fine. I'm not inherently averse to making the board interesting. But I dislike the way in which it becomes interesting in this particular case. I don't remember the details of what I was looking at, like which kinds of variations I was looking at, but I remember that I felt that this isn't what I would like to do. This type of fight I didn't think is favorable to me, so I thought I should prevent that. And this is very similar to Anti's notion of control go, where you're thinking about, well, how could my opponent change the position? Let's stop that. It's a simple notion. Yeah, in retrospect, I think I would play K5 because if black ever ends up playing something like G2, for example, just for endgame purposes, then these stones actually become kind of exploitable, and you get all kinds of extra center moves against them. So yeah, I would definitely play that in retrospect. But I mean, J7 can't be too bad, I suppose. I think most queues hate doing nothing. Yeah, that's sort of why I'm trying to make the lecture. I think that moves that seem to not be doing very much, I think especially moves that aren't visibly gaining something but are like preventing your opponent from doing something, like this jump, which is just like, I think I have a lot of students that would be reluctant to play this jump because it's like looking at thin air. It's not really doing something tangible, it's just strengthening black and preventing black from getting attacked. And I think some players would be reluctant to do that, and that's why I'm making this lecture, because I want people to be less reluctant to do that. That's the plan. Okay. What about something like D7 or C9? D7 or C9? Yeah, D7 or C9 are interesting interesting moves because I'm assuming that the idea behind moves like D7 and C9 is that you are doing something, but also trying to keep your opponent from doing what they wanted to do. So let's say that you shoulder hit, then you are helping out your group and making it harder to get attacked, but you're also doing something that you think is valuable, like you're trying to set up something on the left side. In this case, C9 would also be doing the same thing, where you're trying to, in abstract, help your group a little bit, but you're also making points. That type of move is in general like okay. I don't have a problem with it. I think in this particular, I think I thought about, I probably didn't think about C9 because c9 unfortunately doesn't really help much. Like after white plays here or here, I don't fully see what I don't fully see how c9 is helping the stones in the short term. So the character of the fight that's going to play out isn't different from before I played c9. Conversely, this shoulder hit's a little bit more attractive because now if white does decide to attack this group, the fight's definitely going to look very different from what it used to. So I think d7 is a very good candidate. If I had to guess, I'm sure I thought about this. I just don't remember why I didn't play it. It's a perfectly okay move. I don't see the issue. So yeah, d7 is a good candidate. Okay, so I had another example, but that's more of a full game example, which would be very long, and we're actually already nearly at finishing time. So I think I just want to actually recap things rather than go into another example and take questions and wrap up. So let's go back to our PowerPoint. And I think I want to reemphasize that I don't think that I don't think that doing nothing as a philosophy is always a good thing, and I don't want to encourage people to just as a mantra, let's say, preserve the state of the board indefinitely. I think that that's bad for the reasons we discussed. Like it's bad in a lot of situations. Like if your opponent is overplaying, if you're behind, I guess those are the main ones. And like on the other hand, I do think that it's a very valuable perspective you can take, because I think that there's a general tendency for people, due to psychological reasons that are beyond me, people like doing stuff. They like changing the position, and they generally tend towards decisions that make the position different. And be that attacking groups, be that let's say invading influence. Actually, this is a very good example. I'm gonna use one last example from a game that we've already looked at, but I didn't talk about it in depth. So in this game, we showed when Lucan played p12, his opponent invaded here immediately, and here white changed the nature of the position by trying to invade here and create a living group. And this was a huge mistake. In my opinion, it's a huge mistake even if it lives. Even if it lives, it's just big enough to do this. It's not a good paradigm shift to lose Sente in order to live here like a cockroach. As it happens, white even died, which made it like a total disaster. But I think here, white could most definitely do nothing and like play something like L3 and have a better chance of winning than in the game, where white just went crazy and lost very quickly. And white's a very strong player. White's a strong 6-stun, so this can happen to anyone. And I think that in this type of position, I think it's like pretty nice to be able to remember that actually just playing a waiting move is it's almost never bad. It's you can just preserve the position, make a move that like improves without doing something drastic, and then that's fine. And I think it's a very valuable perspective to take, especially when you're not happy with the options you're thinking about. Another advantage of doing nothing is that you can usually do it pretty quickly. Like it doesn't take a huge amount of thinking to come up with L3, whereas conversely, an invasion like R15 takes a lot of planning and calculating, and you need to prepare a lot in a certain sense, which is a big cognitive load. So yeah, I want to wrap up with that. I want to answer a couple of questions that were put in the chat while I was discussing, while I was giving my closing thoughts. So d7 is not really doing nothing, though it's pressing white down. I think I want to reiterate, I guess, what I mean by doing nothing. In answer to that question about d7, d7 is not changing anything in the sense that, let's say that you were telling your friend about this position. Here you would say white has a corner, white has a corner, white has this like Kosumi thing, white has some points on the lower side, I have some points in this corner, I have some points in this corner, I have this like kind of weak, kind of not weak group, which like it's strong enough that you could consider tenukiing it, so it's not like urgently weak. And here, when black plays d6 and then f7, the way that you would describe the game doesn't change. You would still say white has this corner, like white has the lower side, white has that Kosumi structure, black has these corners, and black has this group, like this floating group. Maybe the way that you would change your description is you would say that now your group is like a little bit closer to influence than to a floating group. And you would be right. But sometimes in Go you have to change a little bit. So here your group does change a little bit, it gets stronger. But I would say that the shift in the paradigm shift is much smaller than if you allow white to start fighting here. And that's the important part. It's like you're kind of minimizing the difference between how you describe the board in the last move to how you're describing it now. That's the idea. Obviously in Go you can't ever absolutely do nothing because passing is terrible, right? So you have to play a move. The position always changes a little bit. If the opponent needs to answer your move, I think it clearly does something. Yeah, I think in this particular example, because it's sort of a given that white will play d6, I'm thinking of this combination as like a single move. And white definitely doesn't need to answer f7, right? White can just tenuki. So that's why I see it as a do nothing move. Okay, I will now wrap up. I think I don't have much more to say. Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching. I think there is there's a stream right now. Is this correct? I think that so there's a big European tournament going on right now. The Ellie Cup in Grenoble, which I chose not to go to because I'm really tired after my exams. Yeah, there's a stream from Tigra which you can go to. I can actually raid those guys, I believe. Wait. Oh my god, I'm becoming a Twitch boomer. It's been so long since I streamed that I've forgotten how to raid. What's wrong with me? Okay. Okay, you guys know where to go. There's game commentary, there's some, it's not commented right now. I see. Well, you can watch the games in OGS and stuff, and usually there's game commentary by professionals which you can watch, and I would rate if I hadn't forgotten how to. So yeah, enjoy that, or enjoy whatever else you're doing. And thank you very much for watching, and I will see you around.